Hello all, Rick here with my review of Star Trek Picard's Episode 8 of Series 3, Surrender. Spoilers ahead as we discuss. The episode sees the fall of Vadic, but not the foiling of the overall plot against the Federation, which itself still remains a mystery. The last part we got the history of Vadic and her changeling cohorts, adding depth to her madness, and this time we see her bring that to bear against the crew of the Titan in some dramatic and uncertain scenes of violence. The standout to me being the times where she was threatening the safety of the bridge crew, humanising them to Jack Crusher as much as she could, knowing that would make their deaths even crueler. And I think that is the word for her. Cruel. She delivers on her promise made all those episodes ago that, like the Shrike, she would peck away at them piece by piece. Taking control of the vessel, she takes out their senses and isolates them from one another with a methodical matter-of-factness that resembles the cruelties inflicted on her during her tortuous stay at Daystrom. Beneath all this spiteful flair is the Dominion ideal of control, even citing that this is what control looks like to the crew as she toys with their lives. I thought this was a much needed addition to her final actions, and I'm reminded of the adage of hurt people hurt people. Already being an enemy of the Federation aside, Vadic was scarred by Starfleet piece by piece, and now enacts that dissection on others. But she too is now strong-armed by superiors within her changeling circle, controlled through fear, and replicating that perceived strength over the Titan crew. Her final words as she is jettisoned into space are said with such exasperation that it feels like she was simultaneously saying, "Why could you not do as you were told?" The fact too that she froze in space and shattered makes me think that the new changeling physiology is indeed limited to humanoid forms, as she could have adopted the shape of some spacefaring organism to survive otherwise. But with Vadic out of the picture and the Shrike following thereafter, I do wonder who the face of the enemy will be with no other identified individual aside from these nebulous imposters. But that could work to the show's advantage. Yeah, just who is the threat now? Data and Lore get a good showing too, and this is the first time this season we get to actually see the new Data as it is. The partition in his mind is lifted and Data and Lore are allowed to connect. Of course, Lore is more aggressive and instantly begins to take over the neural net, erasing Data. But Data has one final play, unwilling to fight back in the same manner as Lore. He allows, and even aids, Lore in the repossession of Data's memories, and throughout this we get to see nods to numerous representations of what was important to Data, from the Holmes adventures to the TNG-era tricorder, which I believe signifies his profession, his romantic encounter with Tasha Yar and her loss, poker games with the crew, which taught him how to bluff, foreshadowing, and of course, Spot. His lovely pet cat that even before he had the emotional abilities taught Data the barest whisper of what it means to care for and love something. Of course, when he did have the emotion chip installed, one of his earliest reactions, aside from swearing, was to cry at finding Spot safe after the crash of the Enterprise D, and he learned so much more of emotion. The precious memories are what indeed formed Data, and considering Lore was built on the same Soong-type frame with some minor differences in the positronic brain, Lore always underestimated and frankly did not understand the bonds of friendship and appreciation Data had. So, of course, he would perceive Data's memories as nothing more than trophies to peruse. So when Lore takes on these memories and finally controls all of Data, does Data not still exist? Sure, Lore deleted him, but Lore effectively copied and stored him away before doing so, incorporating Data into Lore's mind. When the deletion was complete, Law had only succeeded in bringing Data into his own personality, so that what emerged was, well, more Data than Law. It ended on a goodbye, brother, both given and reciprocated, and with that, Law is gone. Well, more or less. This new Data emerges into the new Golem form and is already a very human depiction. As he describes, he is mostly the same Data, just with elements of all the other Soong files integrated and whole. Data 2.0, I guess. Or the refit model. A joke, but yeah, this new Data is basically everything Data has been working towards all his life. Although older in frame, he gets to experience a whole new perception on life as a fully realised individual. He finally gets to be human. The moments where we get to see him hurt himself with the tilt of his head, because old, it reminds me of the time he tried a drink he hated simply because he found out he actually disliked something. And he had a preference based on emotion for the first time, and now he has a full body that will adapt and change. It's all new. He also gets to make jokes and use contractions at last. I think this is a splash of lore added in there. And finally, he is in a state to offer a heartfelt and long overdue emotional reciprocation of his friendship with the crew, and most notably, Geordi. Riker and Troy are reunited for the first time since the Nepenthe episode, and we get to see the teasing and warm affection they have for each other. We also learn that Troy took the unwanted step of trying to lessen Riker's grieving over the death of their son through Betazoid emotional manipulation, but this left Riker's grief unexpressed and prolonged their suffering. It's an understandable event, wanting to spare those who love turmoil, born of compassion, and it was the source of their relationship issue. But they've handled it well. They actually communicated the problem, 1 years behind them but still with scars, and at no time during their confrontation did I actually feel like there was any resentment for one another, just frustration and sadness, but one wrapped up in their deep affection. I guess what I'm trying to say is that their relationship felt deep and enduring with age. They also make it subtly clear from the outset that this is not a changeling imposter, as so easily could have been the case, as she soon mentions her inherent Betazoid abilities. I will also give props to the time at which they added Deanna to the show. It's no small meme and even truth to the series that in TNG, writers often did not know what to do with Troy and her cheat code empathic powers. So at times, she was useless for no reason other than plot or superfluous to a scene. When she was the focus or consideration was given, that worked great. And that is a lesson taken aboard here. Right when the plot requires someone to delve into the mind of Jack Crusher, we have the reintroduction of the empathic Deanna Troi, when she could have been introduced much earlier. Although if she had been introduced earlier, then she may have suffered the same problems as her character did in TNG. However, I would say that her line and the ominous tone of there being a darkness on the Titan felt a little out of place with the pacing of the scenes before and after. Although it was a plot point that needed to be brought up to be developed shortly thereafter, I have noticed that the last 2 episodes have felt a little more hurried and uneven in how they are progressing, with more incidents of characters stating that X is a thing, telling instead of showing, because it's quicker. Worf's reunion with Troy was awkward to watch, in a fun way, although I never really felt the connection to Deanna that Worf apparently developed at the end of TNG, and while not exactly a profession of love, his recounting of Deanna's importance to him felt a little out of place. I'm going to side with Riker on this one. But I have been finding that increasingly with Worf, that although he was often unintentionally funny in TNG, I think this series is trying a little too hard to make Worf overly humorous. Again, this is something I have only felt in the last 2 appearances, and I hope they ease off a bit and we get to see more of Worf's other facets. even if that growling fury he could muster is placated by his new outlook. On the plus side again, there's still that surreal feeling that I have occasionally, like with crossovers in shows, when you see two characters interacting that feels like it never would have otherwise happened, and Deanna meeting Raffi was one such interaction. I think because, aside from Picard being the unified thread, Deanna in particular was very removed from the rest of the show in Season 1's Nepenthe. Towards the end, we get a shot of them all around the meeting table, as they had so many times before, decades earlier, even remarking on the meeting. And it's a moment where you can really see how much has changed in them all, yet under the changes, they're still friends and still a family. There's nothing else to say except it was a heartwarming moment. So, aside from the pacing getting a little unsteady, which I feel has led to several hurried inclusions in the last couple of episodes, the series continues to impress as we move into its final arc with only 2 parts left. As suspected, the voice in Jack's head is related to Irumodic syndrome, and I'm still leaning on the Borg connection, there being something the Dominion would want to grant unity to their own link, but we'll see. There have been curveballs thrown in the series already, so I look forwards to finding out. I've been Rick, thanks for watching this review of episode 8, and until the next one, thanks again, and goodbye.